Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How you doing this morning, Jared?
Freaking awesome, man. We sprung the clock ahead. It's now officially springtime. Yes. And I'm happy because it means winter is over.
Yes, me too.
Dude, I just feel more alive when the sun's coming up and I hear them birds chirping and it's fairly warm and you can get outside.
The sun, man, that is the life force to everything. Everything that we eat comes from sunlight energy.
That's true. We're beings of the sun, huh?
Yeah.
We need that.
We need it.
No, I love it. Yeah, dude. As soon as we flip and I start seeing spring training, I know you don't like baseball, but as soon as I start seeing that, I'm like, all right, we're right around the corner from summer. And then when I know that clock springs forward, I'm that much closer. So, yeah, dude, I'm happy. I got to go out for a run yesterday, get out in the sunshine. It's just, sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I lived in a place that stayed warm all year round.
Ooh.
So, like, I don't know if people there, if they still kind of go through those seasonal cycles, or if it's less because it's always nice, you're always on the go.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like a personal slowdown in the middle of winter when it's freezing cold out and the sun goes down at 4 o'clock. I just feel different.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting experiment to live in two different types of climates, like Caribbean, spring, summertime all year versus Colorado.
Yeah, I don't know. But you hear, like, when you go down to the Caribbean, there's like that island lifestyle. Like they don't, people generality, like they're open from like 10 to 2-ish, but they might not open at 10 and they might close before 2. Like there's just a more laid back vibe. And, people talk about, the islands, people seem super happy and it's a very laid back, easy going. I don't know if that has something to do with so much nice weather to them.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to study.
I'm sure it does. It does make you think, though, am I better with the adverse cold?
That's true. Does it make you tougher?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate it more. I mean, that's what the flip side is. Would you appreciate having nice weather if you have it all the time?
Right.
Whereas we okay, it's time to get out and get after it because we just came off of a winter.
I'll tell you what, anytime I'm down in the Caribbean, I appreciate the heck out of some sunshine and beaches. That's for sure.
I do too, man.
Pina coladas, Muay Thais, whatever it is. Muay Thais,
Dude,
Mai Tais.
It's a good time to go right now. Prices are cheap, but everybody's scared of coronavirus.
Yeah.
They could jump on these last-minute trips and get to the beach.
Sip on some Coronas.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, I'm good, man. Our community is amazing. We keep getting more and more feedback from everybody, and we couldn't be more thankful for you and humbled that you trust us to continue to serve you in this space.
Man, I'm loving it. I'm loving some of our new purposeful practice submissions. Really enjoy reading those, man. We had a submission that was cracking me up the other day. It was about your book, actually. He's like, he was saying how he hasn't read a book that he can relate back to his life with each chapter, and then was saying, and also on the podcast, man, it's like you guys are sidekicks or something. Every episode's like, that's exactly what I needed, and that makes me feel really good, man. It really warms my heart to know that people are getting value out of listening to this. And it applies to everyday life.
Yeah, and it's just an honor when people trust you enough to give up part of their most valuable commodity, which is their time in the day.
Yep.
So we continue to grow. We ask that you please share, rate, review our episodes, no matter where you're listening, on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And help us continue to grow the community and bring more people in, because the more of us, there's plenty of us out there that are looking for a little more purpose in life, a little more how can I become who I really want to be, and a lot less excuses. So bring them in and let's get going.
Yeah, please do, especially those who may think that we need, some room for improvement or some room for change. I'm actually looking forward to the day when we have, a 1-star review of like, that sucked.
I know.
That was horrible. A little hate.
Dude,
goes a long way sometimes for growth.
I have a segment planned that I think is going to be a lot of fun, and that is once we do get big enough to actually get a lot of people that don't like us, like maybe once a month, we're just going to come on and kind of read some of the negative reviews we get
Yeah.
just to share them because I think usually they're kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. They're hilarious.
So I got a negative review on my book.
Really? On Amazon?
No, on Goodreads. I don't even know what that is, to be honest with you. And actually, Jill, my sister, was the one who was like, hey, you got a negative review on Goodreads. And apparently I got a 2-star. But on that rating system, you can see how far they read. She read 2 pages. She read 2 pages, gave me 2 stars. And my sister was like, I just want to message her right away. Be like, you only read 2 pages. How can you do that? And to me, I was like, I don't really care. You know what I mean? But it goes back to kind of what we're going to talk about today with value is I have so many positive reviews. Why would I give this lady that read 2 pages so much more weight over somebody that read the whole book?
Right.
You know, and we get to assign that, and that's something that I've really worked on a lot lately is how much value am I going to give people's opinions around me?
Yeah, yeah, super exciting topic to talk about today. Before we hop into that, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about our guest on our last episode, Patrick's message. What did you gather from our interview with Patrick, and what do you think that our listeners could take away from it?
Patrick has a fantastic radio voice.
Oh yeah, man.
So hopefully our community doesn't want to kick us off and put him on.
Right. New host.
I think the biggest takeaway I got from Patrick was his realization that a lot of the problems in his life, his unhappiness, came to light when his new wife basically was like, you're miserable. And that's my terms. I don't remember if he exactly said that. And he realized like it was his fault. Like he was choosing this misery, you know, between the company he was keeping, the passions he was pursuing or not pursuing. And, you know, much like me, he chose to step away from his career because he felt like that was a big thing that was feeding the negativity in his life, and went out on his own and has created some success there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. What I took away from that was Patrick's story of really taking extreme responsibility and everything he did from after, you know, he shared with us a little bit about his first marriage ended in divorce and that he was blaming kind of some of his unhappiness on his partner. And it wasn't really until he took full responsibility in everything in his life to where things really started turning around for him. Even with this podcast, I was really impressed that he had all these people around him telling him, what are you doing? You know, that's a bad idea. Didn't really have support from others, but he took full responsibility to continue to execute on that every week. And now he's grown his community to a really substantial size. And I think the primary message there was taking full responsibility, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it'll be curious what the community thinks of that episode. And I always love seeing the interaction from our community kind of embracing the guest into the community. One of the things we see after each episode, Rustin Hughes, Dan, now Patrick, is that our community reaches out and, you know, starts following them on social media, includes them in things, because that's what we're really after is building that community, and the guests become part of it. It's a great feeling in your heart to see people coming together around common causes. Mm-hmm. Instead of looking for why we're all different and why we got to stay separated.
Love it.
Yeah. So what's value, my friend?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think that this is something that can change for most of us throughout the courses of life. And again, back to your circle of 5, who's around you. So let's kind of start with diving into what you think, Jared. For
What's
you,
that?
Who is it that establishes your value? And follow-up question, how do you define your value?
That's interesting. Who establishes your value? I think it depends on where you're at in life. Right when you're little, you don't know any better. So your parents help you establish your value. your family, how they treat you at home, how they talk to you, the words they say, the words they don't say. And what I go to here is a kid that's told they're loved all the time. I love you. Hey, you made a mistake here. Like, how do we learn from this? But remember, we love you. Is much different psychologically in their value of themselves versus somebody that's told, hey, you made a mistake. You're stupid. You're an idiot. Why would you do that? Because when you're growing up, you don't know your value. Your value is very external based. Parents, family, teachers. Definitely. Just like you said, you get that paper and you got an A and I got a C. Well, I might have tried my hardest. Maybe I'll understand the topic. Maybe I go home and I get told I'm worthless, I'm useless, I'm an idiot, I'm a moron, and the C is the best I could do. But in the realm, a lot of times, you got the A. They don't know what your home life's like. They don't compare to mine. They don't realize that your A was like 50% of your effort because your mom might have helped you write the paper, or but in the framework of school, you have greater value than I do. You're seen differently because you're an A student, I'm a C student, I'm average. So I think when you're younger, growing up, your value's external. And I think that's where we can improve as humans and as adults is at some point you need to tip and realize, okay, I now have the skills, I have experiences, I know what I want in life, and my value gets to be determined by me, by nobody else. And I think many adults struggle because they stay in that school mode where how they feel about themselves is based on what everybody else thinks of them.
Yeah, man, that's crazy to think about, that we start adopting these external values that are assigned to us from such an early age.
Yeah.
And not only from teachers or parents, right? So some of these older figures in our life, but one thing that came to my mind was a second grade Valentine's Day. You know how they used to give those little, like, you have your little Valentines. I remember at the elementary school that I went to, they would have some of the parent teachers, like faculty, come and be like, oh, like so-and-so is a Valentine's. And I remember my mother asking me, hey, son, do you want me to, a lot of the parents write Valentine's Day, and I was like, no, that's dumb, da-da-da-da. And I remember that day, so my mom was like, all right, like, I won't do it. That a bunch of kids got like, oh, like from Hot Stuff to Jared, and just like these little candies and stuff. And I remember saying like, oh, no, I don't want any of those. And I didn't get one, a Valentine. And I remember just feeling like my social value just plummeted. Yeah. And it's funny, just as you were talking that, I was trying to think of like value assigned, and that popped in my head. And it was just this one little moment to where it, I base so much on external value. And that's just one example. I'm sure there's hundreds throughout your elementary school, throughout your middle school. And you grow up and you take these assigned values, and that's what you think of yourself moving forward. And
you're 100% right. It's assigned. You didn't ask for it. You didn't get to pick which school you went to, who you were born to, who your family is. And, I think for me, I remember back to when my family lived in Germany. We got to go to a very advanced school over there. And I was an average student. I did well, but I wasn't smarter than everybody else. I was reading. It was fifth grade, I think. I was reading at the fifth grade level, and I was part of, like, I was just where I was supposed to be. So my value was that, okay, I'm with my peers. Nothing exceptional. Like, I wasn't better, I wasn't worse. And then all of a sudden we moved to the Washington, D.C. area with horrible schools. And I go there, and I'm still the same kid, but now I'm in fifth grade, and they don't have any books in the whole school that are at my level. So, like, they're bringing books from high schools over to me. And it's interesting because you would think I would have felt proud that, like, okay, I've worked hard to be at a higher level than this area, but I actually felt ashamed because it made me different. And then I would get picked on for being smarter. Right? So, I mean, like, this whole deal, like, think about just the flip of external values and the fact that I don't control it, but yet it's completely affecting my self-esteem. It's affecting do I want to interact, or do I want to be outgoing and say, yes, I can read at this level and let me tell you what this book means, or do I want to pretend I'm dumb and just fit in? And not that the other kids were dumb, they just hadn't been exposed to the education I had.
Right.
So they're at their area they're supposed to be at, but they don't realize that across the world, kids their age are so much more advanced because of the system. But again, it's external value. It had nothing to do with me. It was the values that were put upon me.
Wow. Yeah. And our craving for connection and belonging is so strong that we'll forego other things that may have previously been good values to us, right? Like being smart.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really similar experience when I'd always grown up in a really nice neighborhood, really nice school. And then my parents, when they got divorced, we moved from Houston, Texas to San Antonio, Texas. And, you know, my mom was a single mom. So before she really got on her feet, we moved in with my grandfather, who used to live in like West Side, San Antonio, really ghetto, predominantly Hispanic community. And I remember going to that middle school. I was like, oh my God, like all the kids had their totally shaved heads and these bangs. And I remember one of the kids like, hey fool, what rag you rep? In 7th grade, they had their little bandanas associated. The high school was across the street. So they used to come recruit middle schoolers for the gangs. It's like, oh, I'm UGK, like Underground Kings or whatever they were called. And I remember thinking, like, man, I'm going to have to make a decision. Like, am I going to be in a gang or what? Thankfully, it was sports. But I remember that a lot of the kids there, their value was based on what color bandana, right?
Yeah.
What gang they were in. So it's incredible to see, especially how powerful your environment can be, and then where you get your value assigned from. I mean, you can take the same kid.
I was just going to say that.
And a different path could end up in, you know, an Ivy League Harvard
Absolutely.
school or a ghetto gang.
In prison.
Right? Yeah, in prison.
Yeah.
And it really just depends along the way on what they decided is valuable to them.
Or what they're told is valuable to them.
Exactly.
Right. What they're shown is valuable as they grow up, those formative years. And does anybody challenge that thinking? Does anybody plant the seeds that these kids could be more, or that you could be more? Or are all the people around you telling you, like, this is just who you're going to be, and this is who you are, and this is all you can ever be because this is all we've ever been?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think, you know, our Circle of Five that we did, almost a year ago now, how many members in there, when we were talking about, like, what negative voice do you hear, what's holding you back, it was a parent.
Yeah.
That they still heard in their head, and they're in their 40s.
Right.
And that is still, for whatever reason, something the parent said to them as a teenager or a youngster is still holding them back 20, 30 years later. Because we're allowing that opinion then to still affect our personal value. We've never lessened the weight of that statement as we've matured in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nobody else gets to decide your value, you do. But you can't decide your value without actually exploring it. Like, what are my values? What do I value in life? What's important to me? And that it goes back to kind of one of the next questions is, how many people know, like, the mission statement for their employer? They know their employer core values that are on some cheesy ass poster in the restrooms, in the break room. They can recite those, but they don't know their own personal values, right? And so if you don't know that, a lot of times I think adults identify their personal values with their job. So I have a job that pays me $20 an hour, so that's my value. It's $20 an hour. Well, is it? Is that really your value? And do you now kind of match your performance and effort to, okay, I'm only paid $20 an hour, so I'm giving this much effort. And then it bleeds into your life, and you give $20 an hour effort into relationships and self-development, all based on something external.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, first thought that comes to mind is not all businesses even have their core values and mission statements, right? And it's amazing to see how many parallels there are to having your own personal core values, even a mission statement, and business ones, and they translate. But you're right, to where most people, if you go out and ask somebody today, hey, what are your core values? I feel that most won't be like, oh, this and that, you know. honesty, commitment, whatever it is,
Right.
family, whatever it is, to where especially bigger Fortune 500 corporations, those are instilled. Those are one of the first things that you learn, because just like in schools, corporations, why do they have values? They're trying to build a company culture to see if you fit
Yes.
the company culture, and if you don't, you're expected to
Acquiesce.
Right, exactly.
Or not be hired.
Nice, acquiesce.
Yeah. They were. Dan would be proud of that one.
Yeah, Dan would.
But then if you don't, so you don't have those. So say my company, I don't know that I stand for honesty, integrity, open communication, and risk taking. How do I know who to hire? If I don't know what I stand for, how do I know what I'm looking for? How do I know if you're a good fit or not? I'm just randomly, it's a crapshoot. It's the same in our personal life. If I don't know what I stand for, how do I know who should be getting closer and who should be pushed away? Who should be in my circle, who shouldn't be in my circle? Projects I should take on, things I shouldn't take on. I mean, you taught me a great lesson in this when I first transitioned. And I can't remember if you saw my calendar. I was just talking about my calendar. And you're like, dude, why are you meeting with so many people all the time? And I was like, I don't know. They just keep asking to meet. And you're like, dude, your time is valuable, right? I mean, you remember this? You were like, your time is valuable, dude. If you're doing all these meetings and it's not reciprocated, like, you should probably be working on something else to move forward. And the reality is, like, my family, when I made this change, like, I promised my wife and my family I could still provide for them and I could still make dreams come true. I'm just going to do it a different way. But I wasn't doing that because I was taking all this time to meet with all these people that weren't moving that part of my values and my mission forward. And it was when you brought that up that I was like, man, I got to really reevaluate this. It doesn't mean I can't talk to people and I'm not going to have that, but I have to structure it so that it fits within my personal values so that I'm moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing the value of your time too is so attached to your perception of your overall
Absolutely.
value.
Absolutely. If you don't know who you are and you don't know what's important to you, you'll waste a lot of time, to be honest. You waste a lot of time watching TV. You waste a lot of time doing things that don't fulfill you, but because somebody else does it, you do it to fit in. Mm-hmm. Or you do it to maintain. You know, let's talk about knowing your personal values and your relationships. Right? If I don't know what I stand for, it's easy to fall for everything. And that's a big problem in our country, especially within intimate relationships that turn violent and create victims. Is part of that cycle is along the way they lose their self-esteem. They lose the confidence in themselves, who they are, and everything is based on what the other person tells them to feel about themselves. And that's a drastic example, but it's very prevalent. And I think there's a lot more people that go through that cycle without the physical violence, but their life is still dependent on, I feel good about myself if you say you feel good about me. But if you don't like something about me, then I can't feel good about me. Mm-hmm. And we can fix that. We can change that. Nobody gets to assign our value but us. Mm-hmm. And then we need to be making sure that we know those values and put people around us that feed into the values, not take away from the value.
So how do you think we start to fix and change that when we've had, for most of us, we've had this experience to where we're being told our value is being established based on what types of grades we score. Sometimes maybe it's grades on something that isn't our strength, right? How do we go about establishing our value?
I think one, you actually got to spend some time thinking about it. And you got to actually sit down and write down, what are my values? Like, what's important to me? What makes me feel good in life? What do I enjoy doing? How do I see myself? And be honest. If you see yourself in a negative light, okay, what can I do to fix this? Right? If I've been told that I'm a C student, and it really hurts me to be a C student, and I want to be better. Okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to get some tutoring? Are you going to read more books? Are you going to join Are you going to join a club that feeds into overcoming that? Or are you going to sit and just accept it and live your whole life thinking you're a C student because Mrs. Jones in third grade said you'll never grow up to anything. Right? Like, who the fuck is Mrs. Jones? I'm not listening to you. I'm 20-something years old. I'm 30 years old. But I think that's the scary part to people is if you're going to change your value, if you're going to really know your values, then also comes with it the responsibility to live up to your own values. And that's harder, right? Because that requires work.
Yeah.
Constant maintenance. If I allow you guys to dictate my value, well, if I have a good day and I'm around a bunch of people and maybe it's Friday and people are having drinks so they love me and my outfit's great and blah, 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 well, then I feel good. No work. But then it's Monday and I wore the wrong shoes and my socks don't match my tie, blah, 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 blah. Well, now I feel bad because you guys said it. But again, it's no work. And I think that's kind of what we fall into is the no work part of it. Because if you have, like a company, if you have missions and values, you have to work to maintain that. It's called culture. What is our personal culture? What is our personal values? Are we working at that, or are we just on default mode to whatever people around us tell us is what we're going to believe? So I think how do you start shifting it? One, you got to admit that you're in charge. And with that, you got to be willing to put in some work. As a parent, I will tell you one of the things that I'm big on is I don't buy into the grades of school. I don't necessarily care what grades my kids get. If I see they're working and they're working hard and they're trying to tie lessons into what does it actually mean to them, if you think it's a C, that's cool, but I think it's better than that. I think like my kid's learning. Now on the flip side, if they're putting no effort in and they've just been blessed and like naturally get this topic, but they have no concept of how it applies to them and they get an A, well, I'm not really interested in that because there's not learning. That's like regurgitation, as you called it. So just raising my kids to kind of challenge the values other people give them I think is important. And sharing that and just being around people that are like, hey, dude, like challenge what people have told you to think about yourself.
Right.
It's okay to do that.
Definitely. So my lady's been a teacher for 10 years, and I was watching one of her talks, and she said an awesome quote in there that from Albert Einstein. And he said, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, he's going to think he's stupid forever.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that we're judging everybody on how they can climb a tree in our school system, at least in public schools, right? We have math, science, history. We're regurgitating facts. And like you said earlier, how do we know it's facts, right? Yeah. How do we know that the Declaration of Independence was signed 1776? How do we know all of these facts? And then even deeper, why is it important for me to know the specific facts that are being taught in history, right? The dates, the names, the personalities of the generals, when in reality, what are we trying to do here, right? With the On Purpose podcast, what are we trying to figure out as we get older? We're trying to figure out all of these core principles and values of ourselves, right? We're trying to learn self-esteem. We're trying to learn self-belief. We're trying to learn confidence. We're trying to learn trust. We're trying to learn communication. How would this world look like if that's what we focused on when we were kids, right? If that's what you're being taught instead of history and science projects, to where we're really working on the internal beings of ourselves and working on a lot of the stuff that we talk here. Can you imagine if an elementary school gave lessons based on the previous 54 episodes of the On Purpose podcast, what kind of kids would be coming out of that school?
Right. No, I don't know. It'd be crazy, right? And I'm not against history. Don't get me wrong. Like, I like history. I think if you study where you've gone, you have an idea of how to get to the future. But what I agree with you. Like, if we're studying history so that I can walk in and take a test to say, on this date this happened, on that date this happened, this person was in charge of this, but I have no idea how it applies to me or my life or how I can create, or my value, the value I bring to the world. Why am I learning this?
Yeah.
The same, like if I read this book, schools are big on assigning books, and which is fine, but Taya will be reading a book that was written way before I was ever born. And like, we read in my high school time and you probably read in yours. And I'm like, why are you guys still reading this? Well, I don't know. We just have to. And then you take a test out of book, but there's no application. Like if this story has, was it Taming the Shrew? Is that the book?
No idea. Never heard of
I
that.
think it is, but it's old. It's like early 1900s. But it's literally been read in high school for as long as I can remember. And like, we read it, we wrote a report on it, but there's no like, how does this apply to your life? And that's where I think we miss things, right? Like we just take, and not just school, but experience as adults. We go through this experience, but we don't take a message from, okay, how does this apply to my life? What do I need to change? Is this bringing value to me or detracting from me? Should I do more of these things because I feel good when I do it? It's uplifting. Or should I do less of these things because it made me feel less about myself? It took me away from my primary focus. Like all those meetings I was having, they were enjoyable. Like it was nice to catch up with people. But at the same time, it pulled me away from my mission. It pulled me away from providing for my family, from doing the task and the creative stuff I had to do to create things like this and to move forward. So I have to do less of those to do more of this. But if I don't know what my values are, how do I make that decision?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to know. You have to know. You have to decide.
But you have to, right? If I didn't know and I was going every day based on, I would feel how I'd feel about myself is based on what interactions I get from people. I would take all those meetings because I'm looking for external validation for why I feel good about myself. Instead of knowing that by saying no to these meetings, I should feel good about myself because I'm focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people need to get is know what your values are, know what you're standing for. Mm-hmm. So that you're making decisions that feed into those, not distract you from there.
And every day of our life, people are going to assign and assume values for us anyway. Whether or not they're going to say it to our face, people are going to see a post on social media. They're going to have a conversation with you on the street. Any human interaction that we have, we're subconsciously or consciously assigning value based on what we've heard, based on what we've seen. Yeah. So if we don't ourselves have a very strong, definitive value for ourselves and know what we stand for, then like you said, fall for anything, and we're going to just start to adopt whatever is the general consensus of the values that are being assigned to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with that, and I think it leads to feedback, right? Like if you establish your value, so like when we started the podcast, for example, we had no idea it would work. We had no idea if anybody would listen, but we had lunch, we talked about it, and then we set out like the opening. Like the opening of the podcast is basically our mission statement, right? To do your thing, blah, blah, to empower lives. Then we close kind of our mission, like our values. Because we've known that from the beginning, now how many times are we blessed to have people that want to talk to us about the podcast? Talk to us about this episode or that episode, the message they got from here. And why is that? Because we've created that framework of value here. And people are taking that framework and applying it to their lives. So we have more meaningful conversations because it's aligned with our values, which I think is for many, you don't have to start a podcast, don't get me wrong, but if you know your values and you stand up for your values, you're going to find that you're going to attract people with similar values. So now all of a sudden your conversations are actually fulfilling you, not distracting you. They're not conversations of what you can't do and what you can't become, but more of, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Like just last night, I got to have a conversation with my sister-in-law, just briefly. She's putting together a charity fundraiser. And I was like, well, you need to have sponsors, and you should charge like this amount for this level, that amount. And she hadn't really thought of that because she hadn't been there before, which is fine, right? If we haven't been there, we don't know what we don't know. But because she's in that space of, okay, I'm going to run a charity fundraiser, I'm going to give, I'm going to empower people. Now she's attracting ideas from people who have done this on how to maximize it. But it's because the space you put yourself in, the value. Like she values creating for others. So in her life, she's starting to attract more people that want to create for others. And I think it goes back to starting to know who we are and not who people have told us we should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways that we can fall into assigning ourselves value when it's not necessarily based on something concrete. So one example for me that I have recently experienced was I've owned my business coming up on 5 years. And I think a lot of the time, me included, we tend to base value based on time spent doing something, right? To where I feel like now that I'm kind of hitting this 5-year mark, okay, now I can say that I'm a real entrepreneur or a real business owner, and been doing this. And I've had really well-honed speaking skills since I started my business.
Yeah.
I feel that if I really had assigned myself higher value to be on these panels that I could have been doing it a while back with limited years experience, but for whatever reason, and it wasn't like I waited and was like, okay, now I'm going to speak on panel. It just kind of happened that way. But I do feel that a little bit of my subconscious of,
you haven't earned it.
Right. Yeah. I haven't earned it yet. Like what is everybody else going to think? What value are they going to assign to me? Right. I doubted the value that I could offer based on my time as an entrepreneur and based on the other panelists that I was speaking around. Like, oh, those guys have way more experience. Right. But now that I'm kind of in this time frame of getting to 5+ years, I've noticed that I feel I have more to offer, even though it's really not that much different than a year, 2 years ago.
No, and I think that's a great lesson, and I think that's a great point for many people. Is just like you said, you minimized your experience time-wise in comparison to other people who were, say, on these panels. But what you didn't realize is the time you do have is unique to you. And it's very valuable. Like somebody else out there would resonate with your message over a guy that's been there 20 years. Because if he's been there 20 years, he's not 20 years old.
Right.
If he's been there 20 years, he's not 23, probably on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. But you only been there 2 years, but you're maximizing social media, right? And I think that's just a good example of how we will assign, like, oh, this guy has 20 years, and, oh, man, they have so much value. We'll assign value to them and diminish our own.
Right.
Because the reality is, you're absolutely right. Are you better with the experiences you had at 5 years than 2 years? Yes, it's called learning. It's growth. But it doesn't mean you weren't valued at 2 years. But we stepped back because we didn't have the same amount of years as all these people. And I've learned that lesson the same way too. Venturing out from my career into businesses is you have to be willing to negotiate your value, and you have to know what you stand for and what you're worth, and be able to say no and walk away from people and things and contracts that don't value you. And sometimes you're only going to learn that by getting into one and being like, fuck, I put in this much time and I got that out of it. It was not worth it.
Right. That
value exchange, because every interaction we have is an exchange. And knowing what I want from it, which is okay, it doesn't make me selfish. Mm-hmm. Right? We got to get past that. Like, it's okay to want stuff. It's okay to want feelings. It's okay to want things. But you got to know what you want. So when I engage, like, I know what I want from this outcome. I know what I want from this discussion. And if I don't get it and I leave feeling unfulfilled, well, now I have a choice. Do I go back to that same place, or do I move on? And you can't do it unless you know what you're expecting, what you're wanting, what your value's worth. Is your value minimum wage? Are you going through life as a minimum wage employee? Well, then you're going to be around other people with minimum wage values, minimum wage ideas, minimum wage drive. And don't get me wrong, if you're in high school and college and you got a minimum wage job to get your life through, great. If that's what you got to do to move forward, that's fine, but it's not who you should be. You can work a minimum wage job and have CEO ideas. You can work a minimum wage job and have CEO dreams. You just got to be working towards them. But I think what a lot of us do is we just fall into that. Okay, I'm minimum wage, so now my whole life is around this minimum wage circle. Well, you don't have to be there, but you're not you got to know what it is you want. You got to know what your value is. You got to know that in your mind you're a CEO, and are your habits CEO? Because you can be minimum wage and be the best minimum wage employee around because you're developing a CEO habits. Or you can be minimum wage and fall into what everybody else does and be exactly that, minimum wage.
So what do you think what do you think happens when people finally are willing to negotiate their value? When someone is given, minimum wage or any salary
Yeah.
that matter, and they're like, no, I'm worth more. What do you think needs to happen? Because I'm sure everybody listening wants to have that power, right? The power to negotiate their own value. But what do you think happens inside of us to make us willing to negotiate our value?
I think you negotiate better from a position of strength. So you got to put in work. If I'm late to work, I'm late to my relationships, I'm barely showing up, I'm probably not in a position to negotiate a better value. Mm-hmm. So I have to put in work. I have to be worth more than the other people at my level if I'm looking for monetary gain, right? If I'm in relationships, I need to be developing in those, learning, moving forward. And then here's the deal is if you're in, say it's not even work, it's personal relationships. And, well, Andrea and I are a perfect example. Our kids are about to move out. We're about to be empty nesters. We've had kids forever, feels like. Over the summer, she's like, hey, I want to travel more. I don't necessarily want to live in Fort Collins forever. We've raised our kids. They're moving off. I want to go explore, and I would like to do this Airstream idea and remodel it and just travel. Well, that's establishing her value. That's important to her. So she had to take that risk that it might not be important to me. What if I just said, no, I want to stay here forever. I don't want to leave this house. Well, now we have a decision to make. And I think that's why people won't necessarily stand up for their values. They don't want to have to make uncomfortable decisions. Because you may have to walk away from people. You may have to, if I go into my boss and say, hey, I'm worth more than minimum wage, here's why, here's how hard I work, here's how much I've showed up, I'm early, blah, blah, blah. Here's how all the statistical data. They're like, no, you're minimum wage. I have to be like, okay, I'm going to go find something else. But because we don't even know what we're worth, we won't even have those conversations. Or in the case of Andrea, like many couples just go through marriage after their kids like they did before, and they, I'm shocked at how many people my age are getting divorced in their 50s because they've grown so far apart because all that kept them together was the kids because they never had these talks about dreams and values and this is what I want in life. It's okay to want stuff. It doesn't make you a bad person, but we've got this idea that if you're selfish, you're not a good person. No, be selfish. Be selfish for good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, so the primary driver is going to be the value that we assign to ourselves. And when we truly believe it, the universe will conspire in ways to help our reality shape that, right? We have extreme examples like people like President Trump, right? He has half of the entire nation, probably the world, that hates him, despises him, thinks his value is zero, but he is so fixated on his value that look at him now, most powerful man in the free world. Other extreme examples, people like Kanye West, right? Ridiculous statements of saying the best of all time, best this, best that, and manifest to his world, right? To where if you can truly believe and assign yourself a value and you live by that day by day, you will get there. But I think for most, it's really hard to be on that extreme end. That we also need other indicators, like you're saying. We know we put in the work that really help us explain the value instead of just making outrageous statements like, oh, I'm the best because of this, right? And one example, one of my favorite stories that I remember that was a huge part of my career was before I started my own business, I was in the oil and gas industry. And the oil company I was working for, I wanted to get up here for the cannabis industry in 2014. Yep. And I bugged my CEO to move me to Denver. I was like, I'll be your guy, doing business development. And I remember I felt so undervalued because I was a 23-year-old kid setting up lunch meetings with these land managers of these huge oil companies. Most of them were in their 50s.
Yeah.
then meet with me and be like, who am I meeting with? You have no experience. You know, that they wouldn't be rude about it,
Right.
but
you could feel it.
I could feel it. I could feel that they kind of doubted me, and it was tough. You know, a lot of the first few meetings, I had the sales pitch and everything great, but it was hard. But I remember I was still scheduling meetings, and finally I landed our first major client. I remember I was like, hey, I got lunch with this group, blah, blah, blah. And the two co-founders of the oil company, massive oil company, had like 200 people working for them. And they flew up. I went and picked up our CEO from the airport and everything. And I was like, oh, shit, this is happening. And we closed the deal, made the company millions of dollars. And at the time, there's a lot of contract work that happens in the oil and gas industry. I was a contractor. And I remember finally they offered me an employment position. I'm 23. They're like, oh, blah, blah, you're going to get this, benefits, blah, blah, $80,000 salary, you know, which, of course, is great money.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, I know how much money I'm bringing in this company, blah, blah. And even though I had the doubt in my head, I remember feeling so nervous, and I was like, nah, I'm countering, man. $100,000, you know, I countered the $100,000. And then the VP, I was talking to the VP of company, he kind of laughed. It's like, all right, man, I'll let the CEO know, like, that's what you said. All right. And then I was like, oh shit, like I negotiated my value. Comes back on the phone. He's like, dude, he fucking approved your $100,000 salary. And I remember being like, oh yeah, just freaking out, like $6 figure salary. And it was because I had all of these external resources adding to that, you know?
Yeah.
Not unfortunately. Fortunately, actually, I got laid off about 5 months later because oil crashed.
Yeah.
And I had a decision to make. But I remember that day crystal clear, that it was so like a lot of peers and stuff being that young was like, no, you can't make that much. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't get
Why
there
can't
without
I?
having all that experience.
Yeah.
And I just remember
Why not?
Right. Because I remember I put in the work.
Yeah.
I did the work. What I accomplished, and that was why I felt that my value was at least that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's something that I think a lot of listeners can learn from. If you can have supporting evidence for why you're negotiating your value, like I did, I could have been like, dude, this company brought us $3 million in revenue that I went out and got.
Yeah.
Like, let me get a tiny percentage for my annual salary, right? Like, we're still making money off of this, and that supporting evidence really helped me negotiate the value.
No, that's good. And I think what you mentioned there is important for people. Sometimes when you negotiate your value, and one, you know your value and you're willing to stand up for it, it gets scary. Mm-hmm. It's fearful because, just like you said, people will be like, oh, you can't do that. You can't be worth that much. And why are they telling you that? Because they want you in with them. Mm-hmm. Because then if you can't get that much, then they can't get it either. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, if you got $100,000 and I've been doing the same job and I'm getting 80, and you got 100, now I might be like, oh, wait a second. Now I should get 100 too. Now I got to step up. I got to start working harder. I got to start preparing myself more. I got to start expanding my experiences and my knowledge. And then I got to face the fear and go tell them, hey, I need that $100,000 too. Right. But it's easier if we all just stay back.
It is. And sometimes we push ourselves down. We lower our own value.
Yeah.
You know, another example too, right around that, before that happened, when I first started my career, my father's in the car business, and midway through college made Dean's List 4.0. He let me have a BMW, 7 Series BMW, beautiful vehicle.
Yeah.
And then I started going to my job, and my car was nicer than my boss's, right? And I didn't pay for the car, right? So I was like, dude, I'm not worth this.
Yeah.
You know, I should not be driving around this car. And I remember I made the decision. I called my dad. I was like, I don't want this. I'm going to give it back to you. And all my close friends, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
You getting rid of Bella Beam? I named it Bella Beam. Bella Beam, dude, you getting rid of Bella Beam? Like, that's the dumbest thing. But I felt that my value wasn't there. I was like, oh, I'm just starting my career. Like, I'm not valuable enough to drive this vehicle. So I gave it back, and I pushed my own value just because of my environment, right? Of like, oh, I'm an entry-level worker starting out my career. I shouldn't have this. And I assigned my value even to the vehicle that I drive.
To a Toyota Corolla.
Yeah, Honda Accord, actually.
Give me a Honda Accord,
baby. Good on gas. And I bought it myself, so I felt a lot better. But that, for me, was kind of a double-edged sword because now that I think about it, I'm like, man, I should have kept that shit. Like, I deserve a BMW. But I also wanted my own internal value of one of my values
Earning
is
it.
exactly.
Yeah, which is not wrong, right? Like that, I don't. You didn't want it because you didn't feel you earned it,
Right.
which I think is fine. But then you went out and did your thing.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't allow the Honda Accord to be what you'd always be.
Right.
You know, and I think that's for too many people. We allow moments in our lives to define our value forever.
Yeah.
Right?
You gotta show up every day.
You gotta show up every day, and like too many people had a dream, had a vision, maybe even tried it and failed, and because they don't know their value, one failure is the reason why they never try again, because they only value that failure. They see themselves as a failure. We're all going to fail. I failed yesterday. I failed today. I'm going to fail tomorrow. But we're not ingrained to realize that if you're trying and failing, you're actually learning as long as you continue to progress down that road.
Mm-hmm.
Failing's bad. I disagree. Failing's great. If you learn from it and move forward, it means you're trying new shit. Mm-hmm. But we have such a risk-adverse adult society that failing hurts my social media numbers. Failing is embarrassing. Failing is judging. If they're judging you, the only people that judge your failures are the people that aren't trying their own. Because if I see you fail, because I know one of my values is risk-taking and trying scary stuff. So if my book plummets, and it's the worst book in the history of the world, I know one dude I don't have to worry about their value changing is you. Because you're also engaged in things where you may have the worst thing in the world. And you can come to me and I'll be like, dude, what did we learn from that one? That didn't work out well, right? And we'll move forward. But when I assign value to all the people that want to talk down to you, make you feel bad, they're only doing that because they're not doing the things they wish they were doing. Because the people that are doing the dreams, doing the visions, moving forward, I don't have time to sit and judge all your stuff. Most importantly, I probably don't even know you failed because I haven't seen it because I'm trying to focus on our stuff. But for some reason, because we don't know our values, we don't know what we stand for, we are basing it on what everybody else thinks, we don't even try anymore. And to me, that's the saddest thing in life. It's when you literally just reach your peak in your mid-20s, your mid-30s, because you got a career, you got a job, you got a white picket fence, and that's all you'll be for the next 60 years. And, you know, the story, the vision I always have is that guy that tells you about how good he was in high school.
Yeah.
And he's 50 years old. Bro, how good are you now? High school is the best you got? Well, that's sad. Because that means you assign the value you had in high school has allowed to be carried for your whole life. And we do that to ourselves because we don't know our values. We don't know what we stand for. We don't know what we want. So be selfish. Create some values for yourself. Demand this from your relationships. Nurturing, fulfilling, whatever it is you want, demand that. And don't settle because everybody else wants to settle around you. If everybody around you settle, and find new people to be around.
Yeah. Yeah, every day is a new opportunity to reassign value and to explore what exactly it is that we value, because what we value as a high schooler probably won't be the same as what we value someone, you know, when we get to the middle of our life.
Shouldn't
when
be.
we have a family, when, you know, our values are constantly changing.
Yeah.
So we have to continuously reassess and ask ourselves, what really is valuable to me?
Yeah.
What are the most important things to me, and am I living my life aligned with what's really most important to
Right.
me?
Because if you don't know that, it's like being on a road trip without a map. You're just randomly going. You don't know where you're headed. Mm-hmm. Your values guide you. Mm-hmm. And they change. And it's okay to change. And it's okay to let somebody in, you know, take that meeting, take that risk, and have it fail. And then maybe it doesn't fulfill you. And then learn from it and don't do it again.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, and we don't have to be perfect. Life isn't perfect for sure.
Yeah.
Good? Ready for some practice?
Good. Let's do it. All right, guys. So step 1 of this week's purposeful practice is identify your core personal values. There's lots of exercises you can look up on Google to do this. finding personal core values and really selecting the ones that are most important to you. Part 2, are these values currently being met in your career, relationships, fitness plans? Part 3, who is establishing your personal value? And most importantly, email your practice to us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com.
Awesome work this week, my friend. It's always a blessing to sit here with you and get some insights from you and be able to share them with our community.
Amen, brother. Always a great time.
All right. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.